Cheer up, Postacoglu. Oh, what can it mean to yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon. I'm not singing that bit. Podcast. Lots to talk about today, lots to get through. Welcome back to the Monday Show. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being here on YouTube. If you are, make sure you subscribe, hit like. If you're listening to us on Patreon or as a YouTube member, thank you so much. We have a very special guest today because the other guys can't make it. No, that sounds like we've sort of invited you for no reason. You know him from the the other guys couldn't be here, so we had to invite Rohan. It's Rohan! Yay!
Hey!
Hello,
First time on the main pod.
Yeah, so, we normally record on a Monday, and Rohan can't be here. But Rohan, you can normally find him on the Cannon podcast live on a Thursday. We're normally quite silly on that show. We have to be a little bit more serious here because it's serious football analysis, Rohan. Serious.
Yes, can't be dear. I think a lot of people at times also... Well, you get a small minority like, oh, we need to be a bit more serious in the Thursday chat. But no, the Thursday chat is just chilled. It's vibes.
Just chill vibes.
And analysis. You get analysis as well, you do.
The free content isn't exactly to my liking. It's not exactly to my liking. Well, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Thank you all for being here. Happy Monday when you're watching this. Yes, Spurs did capitulate, which was very, very funny. They are Tim Pot, aren't they? They really are. They're just Tim Pot.
It's just... But I have to say, do you know what it is? With Ange, I feel like last season when it was the honeymoon period, he was put on a pedestal that he simply isn't at. But now I feel he's become a tad underrated as well. That's how I see it. And especially when you look at, like, for example, how other managers are looked on. When you look at Ten Hag, I think Ange, and Spurs, that project is way stronger. And obviously there are things, especially the box defending. And I think there are a lot of aspects to which you watch Spurs play and then you look at how Arsenal play in terms of managing adversity and how we do it so well. They're not necessarily able to do that because of how attack-minded their thought process is for each individual player. That's where you see big flaws with them. But I do think there's quite a lot of encouraging signs for them. But they are Tim Pot. They are Tim Pot,
yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think also I saw a tweet from Elliot Yankee Gunner from Arsenal Vision. He said something like, it's so infuriating when you have a manager like Arteta who's so detail-oriented. Or it's not infuriating, but it's kind of like, it's just so interesting. And you get that sort of the interview where he's talking about Brighton and they're like, how are you going to lean out the chaos of the game? He's like, I'm not going to. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. It's great for us, but obviously for their fans, that must be frustrating. But we're here to talk Arsenal versus Southampton. We won, what was it, 3-1 in the end? It was 3-1.
3-1 in the end.
It was 3-1 in the end. I do remember the score of it. You were at the game, weren't you?
I was indeed.
Okay, how was that experience?
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, I thought the atmosphere was a bit flat, but I don't necessarily think a 3:00 against Southampton, with all due respect, is going to be the most thrilling atmosphere you're going to see. But I always felt when there is adversity, like in any ground, you then start to see the energy levels start to raise, and then it became a lot more atmospheric. But yeah, it was okay. It was quite nervy for me, especially going into the game. And this is where the Premier League kind of is a humbler, and I assume, most Arsenal fans predicting the outcome of the game, they're looking at this being, a stat pad sesh, a 4-5-0. But in the end, sometimes it doesn't necessarily work like that, as we saw against Leicester as well last weekend. Obviously, the metrics and how we played, it warranted, for me, 6 or 7 goals, but it doesn't necessarily happen like that. And I thought on Saturday, again, I think there are a lot of encouraging signs. I think there are things that I wasn't happy with, but I think there's context behind it due to certain plays we didn't have, and that led to certain plays I don't believe were platformed in the best possible way. But all in all, I think, like I said, I tweeted out yesterday that when I look at everything, the start of the season so far at baseline, one thing that Arsenal have showed really well is the fact that they can cope during adversity consistently in a wide range of different areas, in terms of the red cards, in terms of the players that are missing. And we're coming out of it on the second international break, going into the second international break with 17 points and playing some of the best teams in the league, especially the hardest and toughest grounds to go to as well. But yeah, no, it was interesting. There were a lot of things, I think, that we'll obviously talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, I think on that point about the sort of different types of games, I sort of feel that. I think if we go back to the start of the season, we've got that sort of nice sunny home game against Wolves, and then we've got a difficult away match against Villa, which is always going to be a tough game, which you feel like not that we nicked a win, but it's always going to come down to the fine margins. Then you have how do you respond to that sort of red card? We come out against Spurs, we go to that ground and we win there without our captain, without our whole midfield. You go away to City and you play brilliantly in the first half, and then you have another, bit of adversity. Then you go and smash Bolton. It feels like we've done a different, like a lot of different types of games. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say, which I think is quite exciting to sort of see so far this season, especially with the adversity, as you mentioned there, the fixtures that we've had, which have not been easy. I think that I saw, I think Scott Willis did a metric about relative difficulty of fixture. Arsenal are right up there, man. Right up there for the start of the season. So what we 1 point off top?
1 point off top. And again, I think just to add on to that point, I think there was an interview that Arteta did with the Men in Blazers, a YouTube channel, and the interview he's so good in terms of how he approaches it.
I like him.
and how it feels like it feels like the person who's being interviewed, they want to be there and they actually enjoy the conversation, and you don't necessarily get that with a lot of reporters, but he does it brilliantly. And one thing Arteta mentioned in that interview was the fact that Arsenal need to become a total team, and then he put a lot of emphasis on Arsenal being able to win when they're not at their best day. That is key, because ultimately tactics and platforming players, etc., it's all well and good, but they are humans and they're going to have days in which they're not at their best, and you're going to come up against another team who is arguably performing better than you in that game, but you still need to find a way. And I'll always look at the Aston Villa game this season, in which we weren't at our best. We did certain things really well tactically, but ultimately I think a lot of Arsenal fans and people in general would look at that and it wasn't Arsenal's best performance, but they found a way. And a lot of these games where we've gone for adversity in different contexts, we've been able to do it. And that for me is important, because we know how good we are, and it's about us being able to consistently find a way during tough moments, and that's what we're doing so far as well.
Yeah, it's interesting messaging, isn't it? Because I think I heard Bukayo say it as well. Bukayo, my friend. I heard Bukayo Saka talk about it as well. It's funny. I think since he's been captain, I've seen there's a little bit more in him, not only just on the pitch, but also off the pitch, in terms of the how he's approaching the media. He seems a little bit more confident. I think he actually did an interview with Men in Blazers as well, where he did quite forthright and which is great to see. And I think that's the next step for him. Has been something we've been calling for a long time. But and ultimately what matters is on the pitch, which we'll certainly come to later. But I think I wonder how conscious it is, because that's something I've heard other players say. I've heard it feels like that is the sort of the messaging at the start of this season is win in any context, both explicitly and implicitly. That feels like almost the story of the start of this season. I'm so excited for what's to come. We'll sort of come to once we've properly broken down Southampton, we'll come to sort of what we're expecting after the international break. But we've had a brilliant start. We really have. So I'm really, really pleased. Let's come to the lineup then. So obviously Raya, Partey was at right back, probably the notable change really. Jorginho and Rice in the middle, and then Gabriel Jesus up top. Let's do. I was actually on another tab and I changed back to you, and I saw your face, and I should have expected it. Okay, I did this on the instant reaction as well. I spoke about my issues with us in possession. Let's sort of get the negatives out of the way first, because I don't want to spend too much time on a negative on a win. Unless it's a long-term pattern, which the things I'm going to talk about aren't. It's not worth for me spending hours and hours on a podcast breaking it down. But I do want to say it, because you've got to be fair. This wasn't a Jesus game for me. And I was frustrated with Jesus' performance, which we spoke about a bit more in this reaction, which you wouldn't go check that out. So I want to give you the platform to talk about that. And I just want to sort of put these things to you about us in possession in the first half. As I feel with Jesus, there's an issue there, which maybe you can talk about. But I thought we were far too touch-heavy in terms of our attacking players. I felt because Southampton were so horizontal across that, it didn't feel like they had once we got them into their box, it felt like they were just in one long line, and the spaces were actually on the edge of the box. And if Saka was getting doubled up on, Havertz would sometimes drop into that space that's created in the half space when he's doubled up upon, but wouldn't always. I think we needed a bit more dynamism. I just didn't love us in possession. I think there are a number of things. What we did so brilliantly against Leicester is we got them to jump, and we couldn't quite do that with Southampton. So then, okay, you go for, you use that space that's created, or you go for those balls in behind. I think a lot of this is related to Jesus. But yeah, sort of that thoughts on that first half, which I did find quite frustrating, to be honest.
Yeah, I felt in the ground, actually. I've got a different perspective on the first half now after rewatching it. But at the ground, I felt we were quite, again, slow, lethargic. And like you said, I don't think we provoked enough jumps from Southampton. I think what we do really well is when we play like back passes and we stagger our lines, it kind of forces teams to come onto us because players aren't necessarily in the best position to be able to progress forward, but that's what we want to do. We're kind of baiting them in and then we play through, which is what we've been doing really well. We did really well against Leicester. But when I watched it back, I actually felt that the way that we accessed the final third was really good, especially in terms of getting it into Saka, which is what we consistently have been doing, for God knows how many years. But also for the left-hand side, I still feel there's a lot more symmetry in terms of how we're getting into the final third, which is something we didn't necessarily see last season. And you could kind of look into the numbers and the touch maps, etc., as well into that, with the left-hand side not being effective. But I think, again, we'll probably talk about him. Calafiori is having a massive impact in that sense. The biggest issue that I have, and I think it kind of goes into the Jesus point and why I wanted Nwaneri to start, because one of the things, Kai Havertz, now again, we probably will talk about him because I think he should have his own real segment in general. But Kai Havertz is showing an effectiveness regardless of where he's being deployed at the moment. And that's coming from the confidence at which he's playing with. And a lot of people are looking at him playing as, he's playing centre forward. Now, he's not playing centre forward. He's playing effectively where Martin Odegaard is. Literally, I know we joke about it, but nominally, that is where Kai Havertz is playing. And when we funnel play towards the right-hand side, Kai Havertz, because he's part of that right-hand side unit, he is therefore coming a lot wider to try and support Saka in those situations, because Thomas Partey, and again, this is where I can't put too much criticism on Arteta, etc., because Thomas Partey was the only player he had available to start the game at right back, and he doesn't have that level of dynamism to support Saka in those attacks. And what that meant is that Havertz, when we funnel play towards the right-hand side, he'd be coming to support Saka and becoming a lot wider. And he did that really well, by the way. That's what I want to emphasise. But Havertz should be more in box situations there for me, and he should be situationally dropping out wide as opposed to predominantly.
I completely agree. And just, sorry to cut you off, but just quickly, on the point I was making before about the spaces that were there, because Saka's slowing the game down because he's being doubled up upon, what you need is an injection of pace, and that's not what Havertz is. That's not a bad thing. That's just not who Havertz is. That's why I was looking at someone like a Nwaneri, and I'm going, well, in that place, you would be playing those quick 1-2s. You'd be running around Saka. You'd be buzzing around the guy who is that sort of strong, stable influence.
Yeah. And I think when we're looking at, in terms of how Arsenal progressed through the thirds, one of the things that Southampton were doing is that when they were pushing their winger to press our wide centre back, which was Thomas Partey, that is a key trigger for our number 8 to drift out wide and then to carry the ball. And that was Kai Havertz doing that on a lot of occasions. And he did it well, but I'm thinking to myself, if that was Nwaneri, you'd get a lot more effectiveness and a lot more impetus, and then you'd allow Kai Havertz to do what he does best in terms of being able to occupy the box. And like I said, what I really want to reiterate is the fact that Kai Havertz is showing an effectiveness in this role, but I don't necessarily think that it is platforming him nor others around him, and that it's kind of added. The frustration is more there because Thomas Partey, who I thought had a really good game, by the way, he simply is not able to give Saka that level of support because he doesn't have the running power that a Jurriën Timber, that a Ben White does. But actually what's quite funny is in the second half, I did notice Thomas Partey being more of this decoy, going a little bit higher and wider, but also in the half space. And if you look at the build-up to the Martinelli goal with the trademark half space cross towards the back post, it actually comes from Thomas Partey joining and giving that underlapping run, and then Saka comes inside, and you can see Havertz, because Thomas Partey is making that run, he can then stay in the box more. So that's where that's where the frustration had. And I think with Jesus, it's very frustrating watching him play in general for me. And I think I actually didn't think he actually had too poor of a game when I watched it back. I think my emotions kind of caught me when watching it at the ground, but I just don't think he's offering enough to this team. And the worry that I have with Gabriel Jesus is that when we look at Arsenal in terms of different game states, different positions, first and second choice, Gabriel Jesus, I don't think would be anyone's first or second choice left wing. I don't think he'd be most people's first or second choice right wing, because you'd have Saka and Sterling being that backup, and then likewise Martinelli and Sterling. And then when we're talking about up front, false 9, number 9, You've got Havertz, and then I'd argue most people would look at Trossard being that second choice. So we're looking at different roles and positions across the team. And Jesus isn't necessarily going to be one of the first guys that you're looking at. And I also think, and you mentioned this actually as well, in terms of when the game becomes basketball-y, that suits Jesus more, which I completely agree. But I think the current version of Jesus, I've not seen enough from him to really give me that confidence that he's going to be able to influence those sorts of game states relative to others who we have in the squad. And actually, his most frustrating moments yesterday for me came when the game came a little bit more stretched and we won the ball high and there was space to exploit, and he made some really poor decisions. So, yeah, it's frustrating. But, I think the hope that we have is the fact that we can somehow rekindle that form that he showed before the 2022 World Cup. But the fact that it was, it's a long time ago now.
Yeah. We keep talking about it. It's just not happening. It's the similar thing. I always find it interesting which players we're willing to, and I'm not going to name names of anyone who does this or even the players, but which players we're willing to go, well, it's the conditions around them, and which players we're immediately going, individually, you need to sort yourself out. And I do think with Jesus, his age does play a part in it. Yeah. It's like, actually, maybe I should just say what I'm talking about. Martinelli, I think sometimes there's a little bit more, I'm so pleased with what's happening at the moment, and I predicted that this would happen. But I think while he was having that down period, there was a lot more willingness to go, look, it's the conditions around him. But I think that's because he's 23. With Jesus, there is that, 27, 28? And there is that feeling of, come on, mate, you're our second captain or whatever you might be. Like, you've got to sort yourself out. Look, I just feel with Jesus, as you alluded to, firstly, the physical aspect. There's also the personal aspect to this, which it must be hard as a professional to be in the position he's in again, basically, that he was at Man City, where he was never quite the guy at Man City. He comes to Arsenal, he is the guy for 6 months. And then he has an injury and it just starts to sort of go away from him. And that must be incredibly frustrating. So I do have a lot of sympathy for him. And he probably feels that, not that it's his last chance, but he's thinking like, what do I need to do? Like, it's, my body's failing me. I'm sure there's loads of stuff that's going through. We always, I hate to use that example, but, something like the Dele Alli interview will come out. And for 2 days, every football fan's going, yeah, these guys are humans. And then the narrative completely changes about 3 days later and we're back to abusing them. This is a really hard profession and it must be really hard for him. However, I have to look at him on the pitch and then I look up and I go, look, Mikel, that wasn't the game for him. However, as you also alluded to earlier, we didn't have Timber, we didn't have White. I don't think Jesus would have started. The thing that I will come to though is I think, and this is a pattern, more broadly, I do feel Mikel always defers to seniority. And I just think it's something that occasionally, especially when you have a talent like a Miles or an Ethan, that's a talent that is bursting at the seams, is going, let me show you. He will always go Jorginho. He will always go for Jesus. He will always go Trossard. And as I think I've said this before in the past, 9 times out of 10, you're right. Yesterday you were wrong. I do think. I think that was the wrong thing. That was the wrong call.
The thing with Jesus, just to quickly go back on him, what made him really special for me, and this is a player that I wanted at Arsenal for a long, long time, because you could see the serious level of quality that he had at Manchester City, even though, it kind of, what we see now at Jesus is what actually happened at Manchester City towards the latter stages of his career there. But what made Jesus so special was that qualitative superiority that he would give us in deeper areas, his ability to receive the ball and open up the game through those tight space dribbles, going past one or two players. And that is just quality, and quality breaks down structure. Jesus has always missed chances in his career. Yep. He always has. But I've always been willing to accept that because I know that's the type of player he is. If we look at Raheem Sterling, for example, Raheem Sterling will frustrate Arsenal fans in terms of his efficiency in box situations.
Oh, he is.
He will.
He already is.
But the thing, what Raheem Sterling, and maybe we can get onto him as well, Raheem Sterling, for me, I think he had a really good game yesterday, contrary to popular opinion, I think. But I think with Jesus, he's not giving us that level of quality in deeper areas when he does drop into those spaces. And I do think the injuries have taken his toll. I had these worries and these fears a year ago, and they're still there. And what we've seen since the 2022 World Cup and post-injury is a player who's given us moments, but he's not given us consistency. And when I look at the fact that he is one of our highest earners, I don't like doing that, but I think you have to apply some sort of context.
It's part of it. When you accept that contract, mate, like...
It's part and parcel of the, and he's not, his usage and his value... I'm not seeing us reaping the rewards as of this day. And I don't know if we ever will, to be honest. And that's the worry I have. In terms of Ethan, and Arteta does defer to seniority. But what I will say is this season, I think we've been given like small nuggets of wisdom. Is it nuggets of wisdom or nuggets of information?
It depends on what you're trying to say.
But we've been given like small messages that he really rates the player and is willing to give him an opportunity.
Yeah.
So when I look at obviously
chicken
Spurs,
nuggets, I think.
it's chicken nuggets,
Yeah.
McDonald's. So when I look at the Spurs game away from home, for example, when obviously Saka came off, you're thinking immediately in that sort of game state and managing that specific game in that moment where we couldn't control the ball, you're thinking we would go with that back five, but with out-and-out defenders. But he brings on Nwaneri, and that was a massive moment for me because that is something that he doesn't necessarily do. And then when you go to the Leicester game, Nwaneri came on instead of Jesus in a game state that was very difficult and a game state in which we needed some more impetus, and he gave us that. So I'm getting a lot of encouragement that he is going to give Ethan more minutes in the league. But I think also maybe he's thinking to himself the fact that he needs to use his senior players as well because of the fixture schedule and how tight it's going to be. So as much as I was frustrated with Jesus starting, I could also understand it because we do need to use him as well, and the only way in which we're going to be able to get more out of him is by playing him, as much as it's frustrating. But
it doesn't have to be from the start. And this is my thing about trust. Yeah. I think that's the big thing. It's like, what's the difference between that? But yeah, and just the final thing on Jesus, I think, because we should move on to the second half and some great performances. The money thing, people will say, well, we agreed to pay him that contract. I think if you buy an 18-year-old for £40 million, you can talk about pressure. If you fully cognizantly at 26 years old signed a £265,000 a week contract, I expect you to perform. There comes a point where it's like, look, I get it. It's you didn't ask us to do this, but we agreed on this, and we're expecting that level of output, and that has to be a consideration, I think, when you're at that age. Let's move on to the second half, because I thought it was a brilliant, apart from a lax, frankly, opening sort of 10-15 minutes. I thought it was, which obviously I think they scored sort of towards the end of that. I thought it was a brilliant second half. I thought the game massively opened out, which was exciting. I thought we got to see a little bit more of Calafiori, so Rice stretch his legs a little bit. I thought Sterling was better in the second half. He frustrated me in the first, and then he came off. But to be honest, mate, I want to talk about Saka.
Yeah.
I said it yesterday on the instant reaction, and I stand by it. This guy is entering the Salah, Kane, Vinny type conversations. He's not near the sort of Mbappe, Haaland, or the wherever you want to put those players, but that rung of players that are absolutely special. The numbers don't lie. He's putting up Ronaldo numbers in the Premier League, and he's 23. He's putting up, what is it? Eight chances and 8 dribbles. First player in a decade to do that, and then he does it in the next game. Is this? And I came to this yesterday. Wherever you rate the player, and 6 months ago I was having conversations about he's not world class. I think that was more a semantic thing, but it tells you how much my opinion has changed. I think this is the most consistent. Read my lips, reader, before you comment. Consistent, not best, player of the Emirates era. Because I look at players like Alexis Sanchez or Robin van Persie. They had dips, they had moments, they'd have a couple of weeks where they would have a couple of poor performances. I can't tell you the last time Saka had. I can't think of a bad Saka game. I genuinely can't. And maybe output, but in terms of in every action, the first thing he does, the first action, and I love it because his first action against PSG was the shot. Do you remember the shot?
Yes.
He picks it up. His first action was just to body Kyle Walker-Peters. Yeah. He went flying. And you go, you're the man. You are the man. You're stepping up. You're captaining Arsenal. You're delivering, was that 2 goals and an assist? 2 assists and a goal, sorry. I watched some footage of him from the touchline of the cross to the back post, which is obviously something we can talk about in terms of the tactical side of things, and that's not a mistake. And they even said that themselves. You don't realise on TV just how skillful that is to be able to pick someone out and pin. It's the exact same pass as the Trossard one at Stamford Bridge. The exact same pass. And that tells you it's coached, it's worked upon, and then it's executed consistently. And the same with his corners. In terms of consistency, I'm happy to say this is the most consistent player of the Emirates era.
100%. I think he's he's hands down, he's the face of the project, firstly. And I tweeted out after the game in how Bukayo Saka, the consistency, the performance levels throughout his entire Arsenal career so far is ridiculous. And I actually think when we talk about stories in the Premier League and winning the Premier League, if Arsenal, well, I'm not saying if, when Arsenal win the league, and I believe it's going to be this year, his story it's got to be one of the most special in Premier League history when you consider the journey. Because when we look at Arsenal, and when Bukayo Saka came into the team as a teenager, operating at left back because Kalash Argentini, had injuries. And the levels of consistency that he gave there as a teenager at left back in our worst time during the toxic moments, during adversity, he was the guy who was performing and was our best performer at that time. Better than a lot of the senior players, every senior player. And then you talk about what else he was doing in that period, in the toxic period. He played left wing back, played right wing back, right centre mid, left centre mid, left back, right back. I think there's 7 different positions that
left wing as well.
Played.
Yep.
Left wing. 7 different positions that he's played and was our best performer. To now, consistently leading Arsenal's attack, the linchpin, the go-to guy for this is the 3rd successive season in terms of Arsenal competing for a title. In terms of pure output, he's matched Sadio Mane and Leroy Sané's best tallies in the Premier League twice. In terms of goals and assists before the age of 23, I think it is, which I think he's still got. He's
got the
20,
numbers and get them up.
Yeah, I think he's still got a year to go now to still beat a lot of these guys that are ahead of him. I think there's 3 or 4 people. He's hitting these ridiculous numbers, but it's not a case of he's been hitting these numbers just now. He's been hitting these numbers from the very moment that he came into the team. And this is, like I said, a team that was nowhere near the level that we are at right now, whereas some of those other players have been in much better environments. And that's where the numbers, we have to put so much more emphasis. So when you apply the context, you look at the numbers and you think, wow, that's impressive. But then when you break it down and understand the journey that he's had, it makes it even more impressive. And I can't...
Can I just give those numbers, because I do want to say that now, and also not only the context of the team that he was in and the position that a lot of this was at left back.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the time, because if you think of the players above him, they were playing 20 years ago. It's a different game.
Yeah.
Bukayo Saka becomes the 5th winger in Premier League history to have scored or assisted 90 plus goals in the Premier League at 23. So Ronaldo's 1st, Sterling's 2nd, Giggs is 3rd, and Rashford and Saka are tied at 91.
It's crazy. It's genuinely mental. I mean, I just think I think it's like 14 assists away from breaking the record or something. And, there's a lot of game. That's still a very difficult job to do, but he's very capable of doing it. And I think yesterday as well, his performance and the way that, again, we funnel all our play towards the right-hand side. And bearing in mind, that environment that Saka was in wasn't platforming him as well. When you talk about Thomas Partey right back, like I said, he had a really good game. And Kai Havertz, again, situationally, predominantly dropping into that right-hand side to support Saka. These aren't the best players to be doing that for him. And yet he's still able to churn out these numbers, churn out this level of productivity and the performances. And the back post half-space cross, that is a trademark move within our play. And I've actually listened to so Arsenal's assistant coach, one of them, Miguel Molina, he's done an hour lecture on Arsenal's game model and its DNA and everything. I listened to all of it. I made so many notes on it as well.
We should do that on the Cannon, but after we do Thiago Motta, we should get that on.
Yeah, honestly, and this actually, what's really interesting is he gave this lecture in the 2021 season. Which is when it wasn't all rosy. There was a lot of toxic moments there, and that was when we were really struggling before the Boxing Day moment with Mill Smith Rowe. But what he mentioned was that one of their trademark moves is something called alley OOP, so out of possession, I think what it's referring to. And what that refers to is when the winger or whoever it is cuts in, the inverted winger or inverted midfielder, basically on their wrong foot. So if it's Martin Odegaard being the left footer, playing on the right-hand side, that's an inverted midfielder, and Saka likewise. When they cut in, we always look to target that back post because there always is an overload, and it's one of the most lethal weapons that we have in the final third, because when you look at it, and if you look at that situation, in the box, Southampton are 4v4. So it's what we call numerical equality. It's not a numerical overload for us. It's not a numerical overload for Southampton. But it always is an overload because at the back post, the far side fullback is sandwiched between 2 players. So you've got Marino, who's positioned between the centre back and the fullback, and the fullback has to stay close enough and tight enough to prevent Marino from peeling away the blind side of the centre back. But then he has to also worry about the guy behind him, which is very difficult to do. So you always have an overload. And the other thing that's really important to note is when Saka cuts in, that is a trigger for the defensive block to push out slightly because they want to play us offside. But then they have to also retreat and go back in. So the adjustment that they have to make relative to our players attacking that cross, because they know it's going to happen, because that is a situation that we consistently coach in training. It's so difficult to stop. And the execution, that's what I want to actually mention a lot, because it's all good, the tactical principles, etc. But if you don't have the execution, the consistency, it doesn't really matter. And the quality of the ball is sensational. And Martinelli peeling away on the back post, that's just quality. And it's like,
Superb.
Manchester City, for example. And again, I'll give you another small segment from that lecture, where Miguel Molina refers to the golden zone being where Kevin De Bruyne makes that run in the half space and he puts that cross towards the back post for a tap in. And then you think of Trent Alexander-Arnold in the half space crossing towards the back post as well. Our trademark move is that in-swinger, because when you look at Pepe to Aubameyang back in the FA Cup, and now you look at Saka against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, Saka against Brentford for Kai Havertz. We can look at Ben White for Declan Rice against Brentford as well, but being a right footer there. That's our trademark move, and it gives us so much quality, and it's just great to see, because it's like, this has been worked on so much, and you're seeing the benefits from it.
You see the details. Yeah, brilliantly broken down. I want to move forward to another goal from Kai Havertz, who I thought had a brilliant afternoon. It's the confidence, mate. It's, I think he's played something like 44 games for Arsenal or something along those lines, and he played like 90 something for Chelsea. He's now one behind his tally for Chelsea in terms of goals and assists. I saw that today. It was unbelievable. He's just been a revelation, and what it is I remember making a video to plug myself on the Different Knock about this time last year, maybe a little bit later. Essentially saying, look, you can do all these things with Kai Havertz. You move him around. There's certain things that I think would help him. For me, it was about clarifying his role. But the one thing you really want to do is give him some confidence. And that's kind of what Mikel's been saying. Kai is someone who physically is top. He will press you. And also what I love is recently he's come out and talks about the duels and stuff, that he's like, I never used to be a guy who loves duels, and now I do. And, you can see that's changed. But what's really changed is the love we've given him and the confidence that he has. He's executing everything with and that separation, that ability to take the ball, brush it, and have that shot. My friend Piers, I mentioned this before, describes Havertz finishes as whispers. And I texted him after he scored, and I was like, that wasn't a whisper. And it wasn't. And there's some conviction in his finishing, finally. There's some conviction in his actions. He's driving at people, running at people. I remember watching him for Germany in the last international break, and he took someone on in the box, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. And you can see the confidence is oozing through him. And this is the thing, and I want to talk about Havertz, but I also want to take this slight detour. Where do we go next in terms of development and stuff? Because tactics are always going to be a development and a thing that sort of is drawing from the past and is innovations, whatever. But you can't. There's 11 men. There's a ball. There's only going to be so many ways you play. So where can you innovate? And I think one of the ways is emotional intelligence with managers. And what I mean by this is not a man manager who can have give someone a slap, or put your arm round them, or whatever, all that sort of the Harry Redknapp type thing. Always a great man manager, great guy to talk to. No, it's someone who deeply feels the players and deeply understands the players on a personal level, who understands that I might have to play emotionally. I might have to take some flack for playing a player through a bad patch. Yeah. So in the end, project-wise, it works because they've been played through that sort of poor period and they're given some love. The stuff that Arteta says, even the way he deals with journalists and so on and so forth, is there was a moment at the end of this the press conference yesterday where someone was asking him a question, and it was just this nonsense question. It was just like, if you could sign one player in world football, who would you sign? And he's like, look, we're just not going to talk about that in a minute. And anyway, he presses. Now, Ange, I'm telling you, and I know people think I've got a bee in my bonnet about him, would go, come on, mate, that's stupid. Mikel goes, I'd sign one of my sons. Everyone laughs and he walks out. you get the same thing. You don't answer the question, but you make people like you. It's emotional intelligence. It's not, bloody hell, mate. It's realizing, I know what you're doing. I don't need to rise to it. I'm going to be smart. And there's so many. At one point, I'm going to do a video of all these moments where it's so clever. I think what he's done with Kai is exactly that, and all the stuff that I'm sure we don't see behind scenes, and we're seeing it on the pitch. It's so exciting.
I think that, you know how I think everyone looks at the moment in which Martin Odegaard gives Kai Havertz the ball to dispatch that penalty against Bournemouth as the moment for Kai Havertz. I don't think that was the moment for Kai Havertz. I think the moment for Kai Havertz was the winner against Brentford. And I'll tell you why, because Havertz didn't start that game. And Arteta, I think he brought him on in the 80th minute or so. And it was 0-0. The game was completely even. And it comes to the 89th minute. And again, it's that trademark half-space cross towards the back post, and Havertz scores it. And it was a massive moment because it was relief, but also it was a goal that defined the game state. The goal against Bournemouth was just, it's a petty goal, isn't it? It's like, we're 2-0 up, I think it was. It's the third goal. Bournemouth aren't really in the game. And we thought, just give him a bit of confidence. But that moment against Brentford was massive because after the game, Havertz was very shy and he was just, straight after he was looking to go back to the tunnel. But Arteta grabs him and he pushes him towards the away fans. He shows him to the fans. He said, love this guy. And I think that was the moment because I think Havertz's form throughout 2024 has been fantastic. But I also felt that you started to see a player hit the momentum and the confidence in his play start to increase from that very moment. And I think with Havertz is that we are seeing a player who he's playing in roles this season that don't necessarily maximize him nor the team, but he's maintaining an effectiveness. And that's why when I look at his performance against Southampton and Leicester, and as I say, when we're funneling play towards the right-hand side, Kai Havertz is drifting and he's becoming really wide, and he's doing that really well. And that's what I'm saying. He's performing really well. He's performing what the role is asking him to do, but it's not maximizing him, but he's still adding that level of productivity. And I think when I look at Havertz, he has become one of our most vital players, one of our most important players in the team, regardless of the game state. When we're talking about Arsenal going down to 10 men, and you keep certain players on the pitch to give you that threat in transition, Havertz will always stay on because of the height that he gives you, the release valve play. In terms of centre forward, he's Arsenal's best centre forward / false nine. In Martin Odegaard's absence, Kai Havertz is filling in there. Different game states, different roles. Kai Havertz is fulfilling what the team needs, and that's why I think he is becoming one of our most important players. And when I consider the fact that 65 million that we spent on him, it's value for money. It's value for money for what he's offering. And I don't think anyone would have been saying this. I don't think anyone would have ever felt that Kai Havertz would have justified that price tag. I think people would have felt Kai Havertz could do a job. But what Kai Havertz is doing, it's not just a job. He's influencing games and he's winning Arsenal games. And it's not just against the likes of Southampton. Arsenal's big game record last season we took 22 points out of the big teams. And this season we've already taken points, and we were seconds away from beating City to make it 6 out of 6 against the so-called Big Six. Havertz is one of the big reasons as to why Arsenal are able to compete against these types of teams. And again, that goal, I don't think he scored a goal like that for us, barring the goal against Chelsea. Do you remember the Chelsea goal where Odegaard puts him through and then he
hate finish.
Yeah, pure hate finish,
But there was that get out of my way thing, which is the only real thing I've wanted Havertz to add to his game. Do you want a fun stat?
Go on.
When playing as the main centre forward in 2024, Kai Havertz has the same amount of non-penalty goals and assists, as Erling Haaland. More than you believe. More than you believe.
I really want to talk. Now, when we signed Kai Havertz, and you can go back to, I've done like a live podcast on Dan George's channel actually, and this is when Kai Havertz was, before the Community Shield, and I mentioned how Kai Havertz needs to be Arsenal's number 9. That's where we're going to maximise him. And I always look back at that game against Chelsea, game against Liverpool in the Carabao Cup in 2022, I think it was, and he was up against Van Dijk and Matip, who were, on form at the time, both at their very best. And Kai Havertz completely bullied them. It was Mason Mount who wasn't able to finish those moments that came to him. But that was the game that I kind of saw Kai Havertz and the potential. And what you're seeing now, and as you alluded to with that stat, although I think it's slightly skewed because, like I said, I've been reiterating that Kai Havertz isn't necessarily playing centre forward right now. And I think obviously we're taking these contributions now. No. So, but why can't Arsenal? What are the reasons why Arsenal can't win the Premier League with Kai Havertz as Arsenal's number 9? The sample size is continued, and that's what I look at. I think sometimes what I do think it is, Alex, is that I think people have an aesthetic bias, and every fan does. You have a bias towards certain players that you really like and that type of profile. And Kai Havertz probably isn't most people's, I'd say 70-80% of people who watch football, who've been watching football for 20 plus years or 10 plus years, whatever it is, wouldn't associate Kai Havertz as being their ideal number 9. But you can't deny the effectiveness, the facilitation, and the productivity, and this sample size just genuinely just continues.
And I think that's because he's not a flat track bully. But if he can develop a bit of that, even a little bit of that, even a small amount of that he can beat a player like that, I don't know, once every 5 games.
Yeah.
Bro, crazy. Absolutely crazy. I want to move on from the Southampton game, talk sort of more broadly, more widely. Anything else you want to discuss on the Southampton game? I thought Marino looked really, really good. And I also want to talk about Martinelli, but we don't have time to. But I think there's a sort of longer conversation about Martinelli in terms of Calafiori and Marino and that sort of stuff. But yeah, anything before we sort of move on from there?
Yeah, I think just quick. I think Martinelli, I tweeted that I think he's been, for me, our most underrated performer of the season when considering his... what I mean by underrated is he hasn't necessarily been given the spotlight and his performances haven't been highlighted as much as others, where his effectiveness has been really good. And I think there's some really good numbers and data behind expected threat Martinelli being right up there. And I look at a lot of the games this season. The only games I'd think Martinelli hasn't performed well in were Aston Villa and Atalanta. But apart from that, I think he's been really good. I thought Sterling went quite under the radar. I think what it was with Sterling, I think his final action was really inconsistent and frustrating at times. But I thought out of possession in the press, I thought he was really good. There were many moments where, the way that we press, we have our wingers quite narrow to begin with to maintain that compactness. And Sterling, we had Declan Rice standing in between the pivot that they have in build-up, and Sterling would kind of be hovering towards Aribo, and then he'd be collapsing wide to Walker Peters, and he knew when to press who, depending on ball side. So that was really good. Marino, I thought looked really good. And actually, some of the combinations that we saw with Marino, Calafiori and Martinelli, it was really good.
Mate,
and just
the way he approaches it. Do you know, it reminds me a little bit of Saka. The way Saka can kind of slow himself as he approaches a duel and flick the ball rather than clattering. He's really good at it. The reason I was laughing is because you reminded me with the hands of that clip of, what's his name? The guy who says four-pronged triangle.
Oh, I know you're talking about.
Lacazette, who drops down into a kind of four-pronged triangle. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm thinking about the guy talking about Tuchel ball. Do you remember?
Oh no! Oh no, not him. He's funny though. He's really funny. I think it's DT, but I always forget their names. I think it's DT.
Oh yeah, it is. It is DT.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought Marino looked really good, and I'm really excited to see how he sort of performs moving forward. Speaking of which, we now got an international break. So I really hope that our players go and play loads of meaningless minutes. I hope they all get injured. Just really hope that, Arsenal are just completely ignored. I hope the players' welfare is just completely ignored over the next sort of 2 weeks. That'll be good.
Havertz has dropped out though.
Just for the 1% of you, that's sarcasm. Because there's always one, Rohan.
The thing is, it's different, isn't it? This is the main pod. I'm thinking like, okay, TCP Live is different.
No, we can't. But yeah, I suppose what I'd love to talk about is kind of when we come back. I think Marino and Calafiori, complete touch wood and joking aside about the injuries, I think we'll be waiting probably for Ødegaard to return. Not sure yet on Zinchenko, but I mean, I prefer not to speak. But in terms of players then, I think we're looking pretty good. I mean, Ben White, my theory on Ben White is that he is basically recovering from an injury he's had for a long time.
Yeah.
And it sounded like they were sort of touch and go for the Southampton game, so I think that'll be fine after the international break. So I think we're looking at Zinchenko, but I don't know. Ødegaard potentially, and then everyone's fit, which is really, really exciting.
Tomiyasu got 10 minutes as well.
Tomiyasu, let's go. Nice new trim.
I'm so happy. I tell you what, because when he came on, I didn't stand up and applause. I was thinking, he's going to go away on international duty. It's like, nah, you are not getting 10 minutes of
Has he been picked for Japan?
No, he hasn't been picked though. I don't think. No, he hasn't been picked. But at that moment, I thought he was picked, so I was like, nah, I'm not standing up. This guy needs to stay fit because I've seen it so many times. Tomiyasu comes back, he plays the full 90s for Japan, and he comes back injured. Nah. But
he hasn't been called up, because that would be the most vintage Tomiyasu. Yeah, 10 minutes for Arsenal and then he's gone. But I suppose I'm always excited for the Arsenal to come back, but I'm really excited and also because in terms of the fixtures, so I just want to come to sort of where we're at when we come back. Hopefully we're going to have a pretty fit squad, but then we're away at Bournemouth, we're at home against Shakhtar Donetsk, we're at home against Liverpool, we're away against Preston, we're away against Newcastle, we're away against Inter, away at Chelsea, that's a bit of a tricky run, at home against Forest, away against Sporting, and then away against West Ham before December. I think there's a lot of points there, mate. I think there's a lot of wins. And I'm looking at that midfield, and I'm looking at Rice going deeper, hopefully, if Mourinho can sort of cement his slot in the squad. Calafiori, hopefully, will be a little bit more bedded in by then, maybe a little bit less rash in the tackle. I think Sterling, I think he's getting there fitness-wise, which is exciting. There's so much to be positive about, man. We're looking really, really good. And I think it's kind of what we said before as well, like, we're playing every type of game. Which I think is so exciting. And I think there's some serious, if everyone's fit, who do you leave out of the matchday squad? I think there's going to be some big names. Like, seriously, I think there's going to be some big names who just can't get in the squad. And that is, obviously a shame, but it's also a sign of a healthy and competitive team. It's
great. It's really good, because I think after the first international break, obviously with external factors influencing what happened in the Brighton game, he has blood on his hands, by the way. We should have maximum points. But I think we went into that Man City and Spurs games thinking, a lot of people are thinking, had Arsenal lost those 2 games, we could be out the title race just now, which I didn't agree with, but that was some of the narrative that we saw. But
sorry, just to say, I went on TalkSport and Rory Jennings was doing the whole, so if you lose against Spurs, is the title over? I was like, Rory, I'm not doing this. I'm not playing this game. It's September. I'm not playing this game.
Yeah, but that was a big narrative that was coming through at that time. And I think what we showed, as you alluded to, we've had to play different games in so many different situations already. When we're talking about going down to 10 men against Brighton, talking about going down to 10 men against City, the fact that we didn't have our starting choice midfield available against Spurs, and Arteta alluded to how, I wanted to play a certain way, but unfortunately the game situation, the players that we had simply couldn't do that. So we had to resort into going really long, in which, going long is a staple to our play, but it was very much always going long after that first initial spell where Spurs did have some joy with the turnovers. And then obviously against Southampton, Leicester, we've had to go through adversity, and we've had to obviously against Leicester come back after a really difficult spell, going 2-0 up and then them equalising to 2-2, and then going a goal down against Southampton. These are different situations, and we've overcome it whilst not having our first team, our fully fit squad available. And now we're going into these next run of games with everyone looking like they're going to be back, and there's so much to be encouraged by. For me, it's the fact that some of the improvements that I've been highlighting for us to do this season relative to last season. We're seeing more half-space crosses. We're seeing more switches. We're seeing the left-hand side operate with so much more synergy. And just to add that, the Marino, Calafiori, and Martinelli dynamics, where 2 left footers, 1 right footer, it just flows so nicely. And there's so much to be encouraged by. And also, I think Declan Rice, when he moved back into that number 6 role, I actually think Declan Rice, since Calafiori's inclusion in the team, and him being able to allow Rice to step out a little bit more, come a little bit deeper, to get on the ball and face players, opposed to being like sandwiched between the lines. We're seeing him raise his levels as well. And I thought Rice, actually, when Marino came on, coming into that 6th role, I thought he showed a lot of quality as well. And Thomas Partey played really well at right back as well, given the circumstances. So
considering he's Thomas Partey. Do you know what I mean? So, as in not a right back, to be clear. Very good player, but not in that way. The Partey Defence League will be after me.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
Oh my goodness me. I said he misplaced a pass and I got 15 ats. Like, what?
So against Leicester, I said Thomas Partey had a really good game, but Thomas Partey, I said, what he does is sometimes he puts you on edge because he's very vertical, and sometimes there's not that handbrake. It's consistent gas, and that can lead to the opportunity of losing possession in dangerous areas, and therefore opportunities for the opposition to transition forward and generate promising situations. And then that's all I said. And I had so many
it's social media, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think Yeah, I want to come on to some questions now. By the way, you can, if you want to go on X under the CannonPod, just to let you know, so you can find them, so you can ask them as well. But if before every main podcast, just look out. So if you're in our Discord community or if you're on X, we ask and sort of tweet out questions. So if you want to ask a question on the show, please do let us know. Yeah, I think there's so much to be positive about, and I think you just reminded me of something. Like the conversations we had over the summer, it's all we were talking about. We were saying we want more switches. We haven't quite got the transitional threat, but I think that's more profile wise. I'm looking at Šeško and some of the players that we targeted, and clearly it's a thing that they're aware of. But it's also how many game states are we in where we're needing to transition loads, although we could maximise in certain game states. But yeah, the half space crossing, the switches, the left hand side, all the stuff that we had those conversations about in the summer, they've been fixed. And if two plebs on the internet can work it out, that tells you how far ahead they are. Right, let's do some questions for the last 10 minutes or so. You ready?
Yes, go for it.
Why don't you I'll take...
should I do it through X or... Should I go for
you,
X?
Darling, because you're on our Discord as well.
Yeah, okay, let me actually have a look.
You're the boss on that. Let me start with this. People asking about the January window already. Ian Story, who's at Ian with two eyes. Ian with two eyes, Story, says, why do you think we're seemingly better away than at home? Are we? I don't... Okay, so we beat Wolves at home. We beat Villa away. 1-1 against Brighton at home. I don't think that's fair, considering what happened in the game. The really fair and really understandable sending off of Declan Rice, if you don't remember.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, it was a statement win away at Spurs. It was a statement draw. Is that a thing away at City? Or certainly it was a statement in terms of the way we did it. And I think against Leicester, I think we obviously had that great game against PSG at home. I think against Leicester and Southampton, Leicester was 2 freak goals, and we played absolutely brilliantly. And against Southampton, it's not it's not like they were all over us. I just think the game state was a little bit strange. So
I don't personally I think we're equally good at home and away. Personally, I think what it is at home we do tend to get these like these bozo moments. There's more bozo moments at home. I think where you see certain situations that happen that you don't necessarily see away from home. But also that could be down to the fact that maybe the opposition aren't being ruthless when those moments come away when they're home. So I don't read too much into it. I think we're equally good both home and away. I do think there could be a little bit more complacency at home at times. But again, how can you really quantify that? Yeah. But when I look at some of the goals that we do concede at home, you don't necessarily see them away from home. But in terms of going forward, look at the number of chances we create against Leicester. Look at the number of chances we ended up creating against Southampton as well. So I think for me, it's more down to our defensive record, home and away, where we do tend to be a lot more assured away from home, because naturally you are operating slightly more pragmatic when you're on the road, just naturally. But I don't read too much into, Arsenal, shaky at home. I don't think we're shaky. Yeah.
No, I hear that. Question. Oh no, you go, darling. Sorry.
I've got one actually on X from Ivan with the @Saka is GOAT, which he is. And he asks, are we being too demanding on Nwaneri? A lot of people, including myself, wanted to see him start versus Southampton, but should we be more relaxed given he's only 17? For me, now, I could give you so many examples of players making their name at 17, 18 years old, so I don't necessarily buy too much into that argument. What I will say is I'll maintain the fact that I was disappointed not to see Nwaneri, because I think when we're talking about the types of games in which he can come in from the get-go and he can be platformed in, you're not going to see many more that are going to be better than Southampton. And that's where I'm a little bit frustrated that we haven't seen him against Leicester and Southampton. If you go back to the Leicester game, when Nwaneri came on, it allowed us to move Havertz a little bit more central when we were funneling attacks through the right-hand side. And when you're talking about the space that we created for a player to carry from deeper areas to the final third, that was Kai Havertz doing it when we provoked a jump from their winger to Thomas Partey. And I think to myself, if that was Nwaneri, I think you're going to get a lot more impetus, and you're also going to allow other players to be in zones that they're going to be able to be way more impactful in. So I just think for me, Southampton at home, loads of touches, you're going to be dominating the game in terms of territory, possession, etc. Those are the games that I think it's really good to integrate someone of a 17-year-old. And this is not just any 17-year-old. This is a 17-year-old who is...
It's a top player. I agree. And it's not only that it's Southampton at home. I think you were sort of saying there, like the type of game that it was perfect for him as well. You know, in terms of the touches around the box, in terms of the support that Saka needed without a Ben White on the overlap. So yeah, it's a shame. I again, always, and I'll come to a question in a second, which I want to sort of make a point about social media that is relevant. But, you know, you see one person on social media saying, "Oh, I'm worried, not sure what the plan is with Nwaneri." If it's like, he's 17.
Yeah, this is what's annoying, right? So
calm down.
But what's going to happen is the fact that we wanted Nwaneri to start, people.
Yeah, then
will put us into that kind of category of, oh, now he's never going to be able to get an opportunity. No, it's just this isolated game. These two games, I just felt it was a good opportunity to start him.
Question on our Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, you can. By becoming a patron or YouTube member. Which team concerns you most this season? Asks Sam Sational, both domestic and in Europe.
I think
Liverpool. Yeah. I'm getting a little bit shaky, a little bit.
Are you?
Yeah. I'd quite like to see them against some bigger teams because I feel like they're playing like Nottingham Forest every week. But
well, they lost Forest, didn't it?
Yeah. I'd like to see him in some bigger games under Slot, as in not against United, so it doesn't count anymore. Yeah, a little bit. And then in Europe, I know I'm an Arsenal fan, so I'm definitely biased. Whatever. Hand on heart, I think we're better than every team in Europe, bar City and Madrid. That's my opinion. I was watching Bayern against Villa, and I was like, we're better than this. We are better than Bayern.
Yeah. I think domestically, I'm not really worried about anyone. I mean, obviously, you can always have your moments, you know, because the Premier League is a humbler. There is always a situation in which you can be humbled. Top Spurs? What is that? But in terms of Europe, I think Madrid is the big one, because I think with Madrid, they have showed a consistent knack of not necessarily being in the game, but finding a way during moments. And I think when we're talking about the efficiency in both boxes, that is something that is their bread and butter. And that is why they win the big honours. And that is why Arteta has mentioned it many times in the All or Nothing documentary as to what separates us in that moment, in that time where you were speaking about it, against the elite. Because, you know, at that time, tactically, between the both boxes, we can compete. And we were able to compete before we were actually sustaining these title challenges. You think back to the Man City New Year's Day game. You think back to the Liverpool game as well when we lost 2-0. But in the boxes, that's where it matters. And I think those types of games against Madrid, for example. I'd even say Bayern Munich as well, in terms of not worried about them, but I think in the boxes, they could still provide you that level of cutting edge that can hurt you. But what I will say, actually, Alex, is the fact that one of my biggest issues last season in the Champions League was the fact that I didn't think we were strong enough in the wide areas 1v1 with our fullbacks. But now with Jury and Timber and
Calafiori.
And Calafiori. And I think with Calafiori, I don't agree his 1v1 wide defending is an issue. I think it's the
It's his distances.
He got
way too close to Dibley.
Yeah, that's it. But it's the over-aggressions. But when he's actually fixed 1v1 and he's measured it well, those long legs and the way he kind of forces a player to go to one side, he's really good in that. But I'm not really worried domestically, to be honest.
Fair enough. I think your point, by the way, your point on Calafiori is perfect. I think there's a couple of people watch, and I remember when Dibley first did him, and then I went back and watched it. I was like, all right, he just overcommits. And if you imagine yourself on a pitch, if you haven't got the momentum and you're too close, it doesn't matter how good you are 1v1. If someone's got the momentum and you're too close, that's it. Do you know what I mean?
I also think we need to normalise at times a winger is going to get the better. Yeah, it is good. Because honestly, if you watch back the game, Tyler Dibling in those situations didn't do anything against Calafiori, and Calafiori was so aggressive in the press, the duels that he was able to win aerially. He had a solid game, but yeah, I think the 1v1 reliability that Jury and Timber gives us in particular, and hopefully Tomiyasu, if he can stay fit, that gives me more confidence as well.
Japan, call him up.
I've got one actually.
Okay, go on.
Quick one, yeah.
Yeah, no, do yours and then we'll finish with one.
Cool. So from Almighty Havertz, and this is from the Discord as well. What is the secret sauce that this Erdegaard, Marino, Rice midfield is going to bring us to our attack? I get that they're going to win duels and press people. I'm not going to say that. But what do they do for Havertz, Saka, Martinelli, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. I think firstly it puts everyone in their best position. I think with Rice at the moment, I tweeted about this yesterday. Like at the he's doing a job and he's doing a job brilliantly. But deeper, you're going to see his passing range. You're going to see him able to carry more selectively and sort of press more selectively. At the moment, because he has to run because he's the left 8. So every attack he has to run forward. If you're the 6, you can be back a little bit. On the edge of the box, he's going to be the one the ball is rolled back to. So I think we're going to see more of a threat or maybe some crosses to the back post. He can arrive late, maybe score a couple of goals that way. I think he's also better when he's facing people up in terms of his duels. That's when his superpower is when he's facing you up. You can't get past him. You can, like the Morgan Rogers thing, if you get past him, he's still one of the best in the world, but there's a little bit of a crack there. So I think there, Marino, we've sort of spoken about before, and Odegaard, we obviously know his position, but I think pulling Rice back is there. And then it's about the angle at which Martinelli will be able to receive the ball in the final third, receiving from wide rather than always receiving from the middle of the pitch out to the wide areas, and he's receiving out wide. I think Havertz will have more space to, with Marino pushing forward potentially. I think we'll see him in that sort of Rice thing that Rice stepped forward and was almost the dual 10 or dual number 9 before. There's so many things. We'll do like a proper, we haven't got time to do it now, but we'll do a proper analysis on it when it's all clicking together. But it's not even on paper anymore. We're starting to see it already. Like we're starting to see the fruits of it. How solid and secure Marino is. It's such a good signing. Obviously, when it first happens, you go, "Oh, it's not the flashy name." But then, of course, again, Mikel's schooled everyone.
Yeah, I think it's you've made excellent points as per Alexander.
Thanks for him.
But I think the point about Martinelli in terms of where he's receiving, you can see that touch map against Leicester in terms of how it's high, whether it's wide or it's inside. He's receiving that because he's got a natural left foot who's able to give him that ball with the right messaging. And I always go back to that Pep Guardiola video where he says, having a left footer or right footer, depending on if we're focusing on the left hand side, having a left footer progressing play, it allows the winger to receive the inverted winger. In that case, Martinelli, because he's stronger on his right foot, to receive facing play, as opposed to back to goal if it's a right footer playing that pass. So you're going to see a lot more synergy through that unit across the left-hand side. And also, I think the fact that I always think that Declan Rice is maximised as a number 6 in the right-hand side. When you're talking about, I think a lot of Arsenal play. I think I showed you that video where Arsenal players like who's going to score the best goal of the season. Most of them say Declan Rice because of his ball striking capability. So you're going to be able to see him maximise that quality of him more. And we actually saw it when he moved to the number 6. He had 2 shots on goal where the space naturally opens up for him just outside the edge of the box because the gravity of other players pushing the back line deeper and close to the goalkeeper, it just naturally opens up that space. So you're going to see a lot more there. I also think with Odegaard, Marino, Rice, one of the big things that I felt we need to improve on against high pressing teams, like Spurs, for example, we didn't look to play through pressure because the few times we did, they turned us over and they created some really dangerous situations. But I think with Marino, Rice and Odegaard, there's going to be more safety and for us to play through pressure. And that's something I think we absolutely need to get better at. Going long is a staple to our play, but I think sometimes we go a little bit too far towards that end. I think we need to kind of go a little bit more balanced and being able to play through pressure, playing short passes and finding the free man. That's something I think tactically the idea is all there, but I think those players will be able to allow us to do that better, especially with Odegaard dropping deep as well. So yeah, they're going to give us so much.
More than you believe. Very good. We'll finish there. Thank you, Rohan.
Oh, it's all right. I enjoyed this.
Very good fun. I want him on the main podcast spot. I mean, I've said to Rohan, he can come on the instant reaction, and he just refuses because he just is too emotional altogether or something, apparently. It's too good for it. Wow. Okay. But yeah, I want to get more on the main podcast to get more involved, as always. But you can always find Rohan and I on Thursday nights on the Cannon Podcast live. We have a good laugh, don't we?
This was very serious today, wasn't it?
It was very serious. There was a few moments where you misspoke, and I was like, on a Thursday night, mate, I'd be jumping straight in. Thanks as always for being here. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you've subscribed, make sure you're liked, make sure you're, do all that good stuff, get your notification bells on. You can sign up for a free trial to become a patron if you want to become a patron or a YouTube member to get access to exclusive free content and all that good stuff. Any final words, Rohan?
No, really enjoyed it. Always love talking Arsenal with you. Hopefully me, you and George will have a few pods together as well in the future.
More than you believe. More than you believe.
So, really enjoyed it.
Lovely stuff. Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.